Now, I expect that you've already made your way around a few SharePoint sites, but here I'm going to show you how to explore one from a slightly different perspective. What are the things you should be paying attention to get ready to customize this visually? Because there are some parts that will be easy for you to change and some that won't, and there are some that you really shouldn't be changing. So I'm going to show you two very typical SharePoint sites. Neither of them have been customized. They are as they would appear immediately after creation. What I'm looking at right now is a SharePoint 2010 Teams site. This is available in SharePoint Foundation and by definition also then available in SharePoint Server 2010. And it's one of the classic built-in collaboration sites, and it's really intended for internal use within a corporate intranet. Now, this is a website that gives you this homepage that we're looking at. I haven't changed this, so we're seeing the default options, the default content, the default navigation. On the left over here, under this libraries link, we have two document libraries. One called Shared Documents. It's a regular document library we can upload things to, and the other called Site Pages. This is the suggested location when creating new web pages on this site. It's actually what's called a wiki page library, and we'll talk about what that means a little later. And we also get a calendar list, and we get a task list. We even get a discussion board. But regardless of where we are on this site, the most important area for this is this Site Actions menu up here on the top left. And this menu, like most in SharePoint, is very aware of who you are and what you're allowed to do on this site. So when I click it, I have a whole bunch of options, a lot of which we're going to be exploring. But I'm just going to change over to another browser. Here I'm signed on as a different user with more limited permissions. And here, when I click the Site Actions menu, I get a much more limited set of options, in fact, just one. But because of this, I would be unable to do anything significant with customization on this site, because this menu is where we get to create new parts of the site and change the settings of the site. So I'm switching back to where I have better options here. Now, although we're looking here at a SharePoint team site, this could be a document workspace, it could be a blank site, it could be any classic SharePoint collaboration site. They all share a lot of the same features. For example, they typically have this section down the left-hand side, and this is referred to as the quick launch bar. Now, there's no particular magic about that name. There's nothing quick or different about these links. It's just links like on any site. But in older versions of SharePoint, there used to be a graphic that ran along the side of this section that actually said the words quick launch, and that's why it's still called the quick launch bar. We also have the top link bar, which is this area that runs between the Home tab and the search box. Now, right now, there really isn't anything on my top link bar except the word Home. But you could have several links here representing links to different sites. So the top link bar along the top, the quick launch bar down the left, they're both navigation. And navigation in SharePoint is flexible. And as with a regular website out there on any place on the web, the navigation tells you useful links, but it doesn't have to tell you everything that exists. But because SharePoint sites used for internal collaboration should, for the most part, behave in a standard way, the guideline in SharePoint is that the top link bar can take you between different useful SharePoint sites, and the navigation on the left in the quick launch bar can tell you what's important in this particular site that you're currently looking at. But there's one key link here, simply because this navigation doesn't have to tell you everything. If you really want to know what exists in the current site that you're looking at, you're going to click the link that says All Site Content at the bottom of the quick launch bar. And clicking this link will take you to a page that will tell you better than anything what this site is made of. The lists and the libraries, the building blocks that make up this particular SharePoint site. In here I can see that even though my library section in my navigation told me that I had 2 libraries, I can really see I have a bunch more than that. Customize reports, form templates, shared documents, site assets, style library. And we have more lists as well. So this page, the All Site Content page, tells us what this site is made of. And you'll find the ability to get to this page on pretty much every single SharePoint site there is. Now, if you don't see the All Site Content link on the page, look for it in the Site Actions menu. You'll see it as View All Site Content. It tells you it's viewing all libraries and lists in this site. Now on this page, I'm going to come down a little bit past the libraries and the lists and come to this section that says Sites and Workspaces. And what this really means is, are there any other SharePoint sites that have been created underneath this current one? Now often, if there was, you would have already seen a link to it on the top link bar. We didn't have a link, but this tells me that there is a subsite called Annual Report. And if I click this link, it's going to take me to a different SharePoint site. Now this site was created with the template called a document workspace. And you might be wondering, well, if it's a document workspace, is that a workspace or is that a site? Well, in SharePoint, a workspace is a site. Microsoft decided to call some of their site templates workspaces and some of them sites. Now, the idea is if a site doesn't need to exist for a long time, say you're creating it to work on a document or work on a meeting, they're called document workspaces and meeting workspaces. But really, there's no structural difference between these and other SharePoint sites. And I can see even in this area, I have my own link to all site content that tells me what this particular site is made of. But what I'm going to jump to now is a different kind of site entirely. It's a slightly more complex SharePoint website. This one is called the Publishing Portal. Now this site template is only available in SharePoint Server 2010. It's intended as the basis for creating either a public website or for a large internal intranet portal. And it has that publishing feature already activated. And one clue for that is if I come to the Site Actions menu, most of it looks pretty similar, but I do have links like this to manage content and structure. And that link only exists when the publishing feature has been activated. But I can also see that right beneath it, I've still got a View All Site Content link. And if I click that, it takes me to an almost identical page that's telling me what this site is made of. I've got a few more libraries here, a few more lists, but I can see that regardless of if I have SharePoint Foundation or SharePoint Server and whether publishing is on or whether it's off, the internal structure of these sites is managed the same way. All SharePoint websites are made of a collection of lists and libraries. And what you see in this all site content page is really telling you what this site is made of. And this is important for us because if you're coming from a conventional web design background, where you kind of unconsciously think of a website as being folders full of web pages, that's not really true in SharePoint. Sure, we can choose to just make a web page, but the lists and libraries that exist in a SharePoint site are what drive the pages that exist, and they can automatically even create them. And that's really the key thought when customizing SharePoint sites, that to be able to change how they look, you need to understand what they're made of. And in the next module, we're actually going to talk about these building blocks of all SharePoint sites.